Johnny Harris is a creator and a journalist. In a home feed so often dominated by reacts and hot takes, Johnny craves sources, attribution, rigor. From his OG Emmy-nominated Borders series for Vox, to his video op-eds for the New York Times, to his own channel, where he covers everything from the geopolitics of the world to why fast food ice cream machines are so broken, so always. Johnny wants to reinvent how reporters deliver the news, and he wants to do it on YouTube. And I'm Renee Ritchie, YouTube's official creator liaison, but also former editorial director for Mobile Nations, where I covered tech news online and in videos for over a decade before going indie, building my own channel, and trying to figure out my own intersection of education and audience growth. And that's what we're here to talk about: the power, the responsibility, the trade-offs, and the potential of news on YouTube. On this, the Creator Insider Podcast. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts about the state of news and journalism on YouTube and in the creator community?
I have two totally polarized thoughts on this. One is excitement and optimism about the future of creators being able to report and share on the platform, while at the same time being very conscious of the fact that the journalism pillar that has kept our society accountable and transparent and informed is currently being hollowed out at a massive rate. I think that's a disruption that is necessary. I think it's inevitable. We need to have an updating of how we learn about what's happening in the world, how that transitions onto new media platforms and into more of an independent-minded creator ecosystem is exciting. It's an opportunity. It's what we are building our operation off of, but it's also unsure how we replace that in a responsible way.
Yeah, it's super interesting to me because I was one of the early bloggers, and I would show up for events or briefings, and traditional magazine and newspaper journalists would be saying, like, what are these people? Yeah. But then I saw the YouTubers come in, and the bloggers were like, why are they here? Yeah. And now we see YouTubers going, well, why are short-centric creators here? Yeah. And it seems like no one developed empathy going the other way.
Totally. It is a very natural, normal thing, especially how quickly it's going, that we call them capital J journalists are always looking down and deciding you're not a real journalist because you do it on YouTube or whatever. I'm pretty allergic to that snobbery. I think that journalism is the act of sharing facts and reporting facts in a rigorous way to people, whatever form that takes. It isn't a credential. It is not a badge. It is an activity. And it can happen in any format. And in a world where people are consuming information in these other formats, journalism will and should go to those formats as long as they keep doing that core activity of sharing factual information. Now, the part where I start to get nervous is, do the platforms incentivize accuracy and facts, or do they just incentivize engagement? And engagement is not the same as factual information. And so I'm hoping that we can find a way to make the platform a healthy ecosystem for facts and accuracy, and not just time spent and engagement.
It's interesting looking at the evolution, because back in the day, you read all about it. You had a bunch of kids on the corner trying to sell their papers, and you would walk down and pick this one. But then for a while, everything got aggregated into cable news or into big newspapers, and you could afford enterprise content, like classifieds would pay for everything. And now with the advent of the internet, everything has been atomized again, and you have one blog post, one video, one short, and it feels like we're back on that, like Times Square, everyone like yelling for your attention.
Which, again, there's some that incentive structure of having to get the attention of people to read your story, I think is a good thing in a lot of ways. It gets it as a storyteller. It really makes me consider how I present it so that it really does appeal to a lot of people. But I think that atomizing of content has gotten rid of those buffers that we used to have. The classifieds or the crossword.
Yes.
On one side, and then the front page, if it bleeds, it leads, kind of like sensationalism on the other side. Those are the things that people are buying for. But in between those pages, you have spotlight investigations that took 6 months. You have corruption exposés that kept
enterprise journalism.
Yes, the stuff that really is the heart and soul of a healthy society. So I know, unfortunately, on my team, that's not possible. Every video that I make has to be entertainment and front page. Like, it has to be that first. And then I try to bring in the sort of meat and potatoes. We are hoping to build a network of multiple channels so that we can recreate that sense of subsidy where certain channels will float the deeper dive stuff, even though it's not as economically viable. Because we've built out at scale, we're able to do that. I don't know how possible it is. That's what we are trying to build. But I do know that that's the major weakness in this shift to independent creators. For all the wonderful parts of it, it has that major weakness.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like you have Wendover and then you have Half as Interesting.
Yeah.
You could have Johnny Harris and then Half as Geopolitical.
Yeah, exactly.
Build that buffer.
Yeah.
But to your previous point, also back then there were so few opportunities. If you weren't working for a paper of record or the anchor for a nightly news show, your reach was incredibly limited. It was incredibly gatekept. And now theoretically anybody who hit the upload button can build that kind of audience.
Yes. And that's the like shining upside of this whole thing, is that I would have probably never been able to be a journalist in a traditional ecosystem. I just didn't have the personality for it. I didn't fit into that. And luckily Vox was this nice hybrid that allowed me to be a little bit more entrepreneurial, to develop my own voice, to be able to share and explain in my own tone that resonated with an audience in a direct to consumer type of way. And so I owe my entire career to this format, to this direct to consumer approach. And we'll shout from the rooftops how good it is. Like, I don't want to be a doomsday about it. I think it's good. I do think that the platform will have to make smart decisions to make sure that it is that we are incentivizing the right things and prioritizing the right things on the platform. And then on the other side, I don't know what's going to happen with the supply side of this in terms of how journalists are going to enter this ecosystem and stand accountable and have their own self-imposed boundaries for rigor and factual accuracy. No one's going to hold you accountable, and that is a real challenge. But it's also an opportunity that we are wrestling with every day and doing it quite well, and I'm excited about it.
It's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you and I have similar backgrounds in that I worked for a big media company making YouTube videos for many years, and then I went independent, where your background was with Fox, and then you went independent. What was that transition like?
It was pretty natural, actually. Again, the strength of Vox is that they did plant the seeds of giving me a voice and saying, like on the internet, if it works, you can do more of it. That was the great gift that they gave me. Yeah, we're an organization. Yeah, we have a unified voice. But if you make something that's good, we'll keep supporting it. Now, I reached a limit to where it didn't work. They couldn't really facilitate a sort of individual person within their organization, that wasn't really in the sort of roadmap for them. And so it made sense for me to jump ship. But what I was doing was just continuing kind of a trajectory that they had given me. And so I didn't really jump ship from like a super legacy dinosaur organization to new media. I had this really nice stepping stone that taught me a lot about being on the front lines of creator economy and things like that. Now, what I had to do that was hard was learn how to build a business, learn how to be an entrepreneur, learn how to build an organization. And my business partner and life partner really did that. Like she's the mastermind behind our organization, and allowed me to keep doing what I did well, which is make videos, while she sort of built out this big media company to support it.
One of the things that I found really interesting was coming from a background in traditional media. I only had to worry about editorial. I didn't have to worry about advertising, monetization, anything like that. There was a firewall. I couldn't own stock in the companies that I reported on. I couldn't do brand deals. I couldn't have brand deals with companies that I was doing reviews for.
Yeah.
It was very, very firewalled.
Yeah.
Where in the creator community, you do have some creators who have journalism backgrounds who keep those rigid structures, but others see themselves as entrepreneurs. And it's natural for them to take equity, for example, in companies that they cover, or to have sponsored reviews. Where do you see those lines shifting?
Those lines are shifting all over the place, and they're not clear. They're not clear where those ethics sort of lie. The ethics that you learn in journalism school, which I didn't go to journalism school, but I've heard them over the years. We are violating all of them immediately where we are. Like, it's just they want there to be a giant garden wall between editorial and business. And we don't have the luxury to do that. Now, we've created some boundaries that really help do that. Again, like Iz runs the business. She comes over into editorial and sort of helps direct vision for the editorial. But when it comes down to pressing the buttons on the facts and reporting on the thing, I really try to have some blinders on to any kind of business interests. We say no to a lot of sponsors. We don't take equity. We don't take money from the United Arab Emirates, or China or whatever, like people that we have to be hard on. But there's a lot of things we do that traditional journalists would be uncomfortable with that I feel totally comfortable with. We don't let any brand have editorial control or influence on the videos that we make, but we do give them editorial control over the ad read that we do in the middle. We let them do that. And that's me saying those words. And, that would cross the line for a lot of people. For me, it doesn't, because the journalism stays pure. It stays unbiased, and at least from the brand. And I feel comfortable. But everyone's going to have to draw those lines for themselves. And luckily, I do think that accountability here comes from the audience. Audiences are the ones to call you out and say, like, oh, that crossed the line. This is too much. And sometimes too much. They'll get kind of conspiratorial about it. So I actually strangely feel some sense of safety that the audience will feel betrayed if you cross that line, and it will deter you back.
Yeah, it's super interesting because we saw that in radio for a while. For example, Howard Stern got to the point where he felt like, I'm not being paid for a sponsor read. They're my fans and they want to hear me. They want to hear their company, like me speaking about their company. And that became the value prop beyond just reaching my audience.
Yeah. It's how you think about value, and you as a creator, and that you have fans, and that you saying it is very different than just like a cutaway to an ad. That those are the thorny questions here. But ultimately, I like to think of our videos as a piece of journalism that has a commercial break in the middle, that is paid for by a corporation that supports our journalism. Like, we can't do it in any other way. And I try to tell the audience, we can't make videos without sponsors. So thank you, NordVPN, for sponsoring today's video. I'll say that very overtly, because I believe that it is, I don't believe it. It is factually accurate that our business would not be able to run without this creator economy model. And I'm really grateful. We have a great team. We're able to go really deep on topics because we take sponsorships, and because I do those ad reads, I don't have to compromise my journalistic values to do them. And I think that's a really cool reality that opens up a lot more possibility for creators.
I've talked to a lot of journalists who are thinking about doing what you've done, and that there is that sort of concern, like, how do I monetize this? If I don't have this whole company around me, if I don't have all these other hosts, all these other entities, how do you think about monetization on your channel?
So this is a real challenge for a lot of people who are leaving, and there's a lot of them leaving traditional journalism and wondering, what's my place in this new economy? I will say that it is difficult. It's not an easy thing. You have to be an entrepreneur. You have to kind of be a business person, be business minded, if you are going to enter in as a brand new creator who has to make money. YouTube is the best place to do it, because it is an economy. It is an ecosystem that supports that, but you still do have to hustle, especially if you want to do deep dive journalism. So what we've decided to do, in addition to my channel, we have built a production company that is a business where we are actually recruiting journalists to come on and start their own channel as if it's their channel. They're on the front lines. It's their channel. They're not associated with us, on the front facing side of it. But under the hood, we are, they're full-time employees. We actually own their channel. We're helping them with all of our resources. We're helping them get deals. We have all of our business relationships. And that way they can still do the creator economy thing. They're on the front lines of it. They can get in on the upside of the business, but they don't have to expose themselves to that extreme risk on day one, which a lot of journalists don't want to do.
Yeah.
That's not their craft. Their craft is not entrepreneurship. It is storytelling and factual journalism.
Risk aversion is real.
Your risk aversion is very real, and often among these people. So that's our solve. It's a little teaspoon in the bucket here in terms of what will need to happen to get more journalists on the platform. And I think that's something YouTube has to think about. How do we make YouTube a place where you don't have to jump into the cutthroat creator economy to just even make a living on day one? I don't have the solution for that, but our solution is to try to build a federation of creators that all benefit from an operational umbrella that takes the risk down on day one.
It's almost like you figure out the infrastructure and then you start sharing and scaling that.
And it's a much easier thing for them, just information-wise. We have wisdom on day one that it took us 5-6 years to learn. They don't have to go through that. And then all the monetary stuff, we sort of help buffer that. So that's sort of our vision. That's what we're building now. We've launched our first channel search party in that ecosystem, and we're getting ready, and it's gone well, and we're getting ready to launch future channels.
And how do you look at packaging it? Because the other thing is, this is journalism, this is investigative, it's educational,
Yep.
but a lot of people just want entertainment.
Yep.
I used to look at it like I'm making a crunchy educational video in like a candy coating, because that was a way to get people in the door. How do you think about it from like thumbnail and title, which might like to get attention might need to be more than what you want as a journalist. But if you don't do that, it's the same as you're like, if without a good title, no one's going to read your work.
Exactly. It is cutthroat. You're competing with cat videos and Mr. Beast and everyone else. And if you want to do factual information, like just because it's factual, it doesn't mean it's going to get clicked, which is a big problem here in terms of facts are not the same as engagement, and accuracy is not incentivized in these algorithmic platforms. At the same time, as a journalist who also believes in good storytelling and good filmmaking, I think that this is a necessary reconciliation for us journalists to recognize that we do have to package our information. We do have to be disciplined about communicating to the masses. And I feel like a lot of journalism has gotten complacent in writing for communicating to peers and elites and not actually communicating to the masses. So in some sense, I think it's a very useful nudge to say, if you want to get audience, you have to make your facts engaging. Now, that is an incentive that can go way too far and can turn into pure entertainment. And we've actually felt that incentive structure to go towards more sensational, dark, heavy. So you are in this tumultuous sea of the algorithm. And I think that's a double-edged sword. I think you're going to have to play the game. Again, you just need to have those boundaries to say what can't change is my commitment to rigorous factual accuracy, even if the packaging gets a little bit more sensational and I'm doing this on a thumbnail every time and all of that. Like that may have to happen, but the journalism doesn't change, hopefully.
To the algorithm thing, I'm going to put on my Todd Beaupre, mutual friend Todd Beaupre hat for a minute. And I think like it also, sometimes we worry about the algorithm, but we also have the ability to pick our audiences. And to your point, it can be really tempting to say, hey, if I go in this direction, there's this huge audience. Like tabloids were sold at the counter because that was where people would spend way much more time. One of my favorite stories is the Nielsen ratings. When they were a journal, everybody wrote PBS. But as soon as they went digital, it turned out what they actually watched was TMZ.
Oh, funny.
Because people have this idealized version of themselves. But I think like part of it is we make choices, and maybe my choice here is it's not going to appeal to this part of this very massive audience, but these are the people I really want to reach.
Yeah. And my hope is that in this atomized journalism landscape, there are a bunch of smaller creators who are reaching the audience that really matters for them. And maybe they're not the big giant creators that it's a sort of a long tail of tons of little smaller creators reaching niche audiences. If they can sustain businesses doing that, which is an open question, is the creator economy mature enough that it will actually support smaller creators? Because right now in my world, bigger is bigger and more is more. Like we in order to do more rigorous journalism, we have to grow to a certain critical mass so that we can take the time to do those deep dives. Otherwise, we're just feeding the beast every 3 weeks to keep money coming in. So there is a trade-off there, and there is an incentive to try to reach the biggest audience. We're in this right now. We want a way bigger audience. And our big question is, if we broaden that aperture to a more widely appealing format and story selection and approach, taking from the masters like Mr. Beast and Mark Rober, et cetera, Kurzgesagt, will that have a trade-off effect on our commitment to rigor? And our working theory is no. We can thread that needle. We can do a mass appeal that is also highly journalistic. TBD though on whether or not that's going to work. I hope it works, and I believe it will, and that's the strategy we're pursuing. But there may be a ceiling as to how big of an audience we can get if we're committed to 30-minute sort of documentary type pieces of journalism.
One of my favorite things about YouTube is, and forgive me if you heard this story before, but back in 2015, they decided that watch time alone, like originally it was just clicks.
Yep.
But then people would clickbait.
Yep.
And they said, but maybe watch time is a good indicator.
Yep.
The longer people watch, that means they're really interested. But then people would just try to make things artificially long.
Yep.
So they switched to satisfaction
Yep.
as the metric.
Yep.
And they decided not all watch time is created equal. Like
Yep.
people will rubberneck. They'll watch something bad and they won't feel good about
Yeah.
themselves. And maybe they'll keep watching now, but they might not come back as often.
Yeah.
Whereas if you are willing to take the short-term loss of like not feeding that pure engagement cycle, but to think
Yes.
about really satisfying the audience, maybe I'm satisfied, I'll stop watching right now, but they'll come back more frequently.
Yes.
And I think that's the sort of investment where you can do these things like the latest geopolitical modern conflict, and then why is my ice cream machine broken at McDonald's?
Yes.
That sort of lets those things play against each other.
Yes, and what we've found is we have a incredibly consistent audience who comes back. Our views are very, very consistent because I think we have fulfilled on that promise of like nourishing content. You're going to have a good experience, even if the topics that we choose to cover are all over the place. People come back for the storytelling and the experience they have. We're trying to determine, instead of people coming back just for the storytelling, can we package what we make to just have broad appeal on some of those hookier, kind of more trendy ways of that were the reasons why people click. But then once they're in the door, almost surprise them with, we call it folding in the vegetables or burying the vegetables, where we kind of like, we present them with this thing that feels very clicky, but then we satisfy them with this kind of surprising sense of like, oh, I'm learning, I'm going to stick around. So yeah, valued watch time, that valuable experience is a massive thing that we think about. The question is, you know, it costs a lot of money to make that.
Yeah.
And will there be a sort of premium put on the creators that take the time to like really make that experience, or not? Maybe it doesn't take a lot of money to do that, and valued watch time can happen in a low budget way. But like for what we have to do to make valued watch time also be factual, that is a very big proposition. We have a whole team of reporters to make that an experience. We have a whole team of editors and animators and a music composer to make sure that it's all a great package. And my hope is that we can continue to do that to bigger and bigger audiences.
That's a traditional thing with op-ed too. Like op-ed, the requirement for a fact, like you had to be within bounds, but it was very different than a big investigative piece. And a lot of people, I think, on YouTube skew towards op-ed because you can just turn on the camera and give an opinion, and it doesn't have to go through that sort of rigor.
Totally.
I remember Stephanie from MatPatch, she gave this really good, she said they have a typical formula, which is they have like a hook and then a hypothesis and then evidence, big plot twist, and then conclusion. And that was their structure for almost every theorist video, like game theorist, film theorist, all of those videos.
Yeah.
Do you have a structure that you base
I have some loose formulas that we know work for our intros. And our intros are often story promise. And this idea, again, comes from my partner, who really believes that like in the first minute, especially in the format of YouTube, but in all good storytelling, someone should feel some kind of signaling as to what's coming in the next 30 minutes. And whether or not we are promising to answer a question, to take them on a journey, to give them an experience. It's almost like a trailer.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always have to be an explicit trailer, but something that nods to, hey, it's worth sticking around here. We've put a lot of work into this. So the intros to our videos very much do that. And then and signal all kinds of things: production value, adventure, factualness. You're going to learn. Like we try to make sure all of that is in there. From there, I have all kinds of different ways of plotting a story, but it's often visual anchor, something that you can zoom into and say, like, I not knowing anything about this topic can see this thing and understand what's going on here. And then context. So it's visual anchor context. Visual anchor context is sort of one rubric we use. But honestly, and this has been a blessing and a curse, what I love about the YouTube channel being independent is there is no formula. Every video is a totally different thing. And we have a whole new art direction every single time and a new score every single time. And I love that. That's the beauty of YouTube, is that they don't demand it to be perfectly on brand and every color scheme's the same, because it allows us to morph as storytellers and to be different. And that's the kind of ethos that I love about the platform and the reason I don't want to leave the platform.
We hear that sometimes, like from creators, people don't always remember what their videos were about, but they remember the way they made them feel.
Yes.
I remember in our first episode of this podcast, Chucky from Mr. Beast, he does all his thumbnails and packaging. And he was saying that like the thumbnail makes a promise that the video has to deliver on.
Yeah.
But if you over deliver on that, it creates trust.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like the retention per video, but across videos.
Totally.
And then people start binging and they trust that when they click on your thumbnail, they know what they're going to get.
Totally. And that long-term trust, that valued watch time over months and years, it's our currency. These like cultivating that is so much more important than getting that sort of one viral video. And so we've taken these years to just make sure that we're really cultivating that, we're delivering. And I think we've done a good job to where we do have a very firm, loyal sort of base of audience who trusts us. Now we want to see, again, what that looks like. Can we build that out to a much larger audience? That includes dubbing, multi-language audiences, but that also includes audiences that maybe wouldn't have watched a deep dive war explainer, but would watch Johnny Trains with the Japanese Army. And it actually is a war explainer, but it's done in this more entertaining way, but we still can fold in the vegetables of like rigorous journalism throughout the whole thing. That's sort of our vision next, is like, can we keep that trust in these flashier, more entertaining formats? And that's an open question for us.
We have so many formats now. That's the other interesting thing. Just from a journalism point of view, you have traditional long form, podcasts, live, doing live coverage, and shorts now. There's a huge interest in short form video. But how does that square with sort of the deeper work that you've been doing?
There's a tension there for sure, in the sense that I do deep dive explainer journalism, and to try to pack that into 1 minute is not easy. However, as the person who promised he wasn't going to be the curmudgeon about the new age way of consuming, we've jumped on board with shorts to try to add value in that format. People are spending time there. YouTube follows that demand with their product, and thus we have to join that if we want to stay relevant. And so, yes, there's a trade-off. What we've decided to do, whereas our long form is contextual, it's sort of relevant for 18 to 24 months in terms of longer news cycles, our shorts are a way of serving people much more of like a breaking news analog. Yeah. Still very personal, still very broken down, but explaining that in Yemen right now, there's this thing happening in the Red Sea, blah, blah, blah. This just happened over here. It's also a place where we test new ideas. We did a video about submarines last year, and that was actually a short first. We did a little quick explainer on how crazy nuclear submarines are. It got a lot of attention, and then we saw that as sort of a focus group for a video that could work in long form. So there's also that. I see shorts as a funnel for the longer form stuff, because I don't believe that shorts is a space for discourse or community. It is a space for sort of slot machine scrolling that's fun, and I love it as a consumer, but it does not foster the same thing that being in a long form environment, leaving a comment, subscribing does. And that's my big critique of TikTok. TikTok is not a community social platform. It is an entertainment platform that just feeds you stuff from all over the internet. And as someone who's interested in building a community of curious people, I'm hoping that I can use it as a mechanism to get people into the more community facilitated space, which to me is the long form channel.
I seem to keep going back to these parallels, but it does feel like there is some parallel with shorts and stingers from traditional news, or like breaking segments where they would come in, give you like the 30-second thing, stay tuned for later. Even like the more you know, like just like little messages about like interesting facts.
Totally.
Though this is almost like a reinvention of when news was put into commercials.
Yes, totally.
And one of my favorite things now is Reply with Short. There are whole channels where someone makes a comment. Usually they're about like movies, entertainment, or politics. And someone leaves a comment and then they reply with a short. And then someone leaves a comment to that, they reply with another short. And end up having these whole conversations with their commenters as their channel.
Totally. And that's the best version of it. Totally. And I think those bode really well for like cultural creation and trending creation and dances and sing-alongs and all this stuff. I haven't really focused on using it as a discourse mechanism because, again, I just haven't felt from my audience that what I'm putting out there in that 60 seconds is enough for them to grab onto to like have an actual response. I'm usually describing some facts of like, this just happened in Haiti. But it's an evolving thing for us, and hopefully we can unlock it. Shorts aren't going away, so we do have to figure it out. And there's been some big successes for us in some ways, but again, we're interested in giving people information literacy about how to handle the world and how to think critically around the world. And you just can't do that in 60 seconds. In a world where shorts is 3 minutes, like maybe that becomes more of a space for that kind of modeling of critical thinking. But for now, we use it as kind of that breaking news analog, which, to be candid, I believe that the worst parts of cable news are these kind of make you feel urgent about this thing that's happening right now. Yeah. And like, we're kind of allergic to that. And so when I do shorts, I try to make it contextual. I try to give a little bit more understanding. And I think audiences want that as well. I don't think they want to be made to feel like I'm constantly being hit with urgency. I think a lot of people are becoming very fatigued by that cadence.
When everything is urgent, nothing is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a calmer, more entertaining, more valued watch time type of environment to consume information without feeling heavy all of the time. So we're soul searching on it, but it's here to stay, and we got to figure it out.
Yeah. So going back to what you were talking about with like the new projects and you're building out, one person is not, I don't want to say easy, but if it's just you're not married, you have no kids, and you just want to go and travel and make videos, you don't have to scale much. Like you can control costs and that sort of thing. But then when you get to one of these creators who has like 100 people working for them, and you've got to make more videos to support those 100 people, and you got to hire more people to make more videos. So it seems like at the very large scale, there's a model. At the very small scale, there is a model. But you're doing something which is really interesting, which is the between part, the turbulence.
Yes.
And what advice would you give to creators who are thinking about starting to build out their business, scaling it out? Who should I hire first? Some people say an editor. Some people say an ops person is all the hiring for you.
Yeah. So I just got this question actually last week from a creator who's in this exact situation. And my answer is you should learn how to articulate all of the ingredients to your workflow. You should articulate them onto paper, because most of us creators just started, it's all in our head, and we just pressed all the buttons and we got it from soup to nuts. And building a team is much more efficient if you can take out each of those processes and learn to articulate them. And then once you have them articulated, you look at the ones that you think are your magic secret sauce, the thing that like for me, that's writing. Like I have to be able to write it, and that'll be the last thing that will ever go. And it was animation too. But editing, I was like, oh, there's other people who I'm impressed by their editing, and that's one that I like, but I could easily, like farm that out. Or reporting and research, they're much better reporters than me. And so those were the ones where we sort of started to edit, where I couldn't let go of writing or animation for a long time, but I could start to let go of these other ones. So I think it's important that you recognize where your secret sauce is, how it's made, and then what parts of it you need to be involved in. And the parts you don't, those are the first things to go. Those are the first things that you need to start to hire out. Generally, I think the advice from me is you have to hire in the name of making more videos. Like that is, you have to push the limit on volume, on how much you think you can make, because this business only works with volume. More is more. If you want to scale, you could be CPG grade, just like make one video every 10 years. And
Nile Red.
Yeah, exactly. It's like those people work and I love them. But if you're trying to do this as a business and scale and grow and all those things, it turns into frequency matters. So hiring to facilitate frequency at first is most important.
I do love, though, that a chemistry nerd can sit there and do a 45-minute long video about turning a rubber glove into a mint.
It's amazing.
And people watch it.
It's amazing. And honestly, that's the best. That's the best of YouTube that I hope just never goes away, even as we become all professionalized and hire these big teams. I still see that ethic on the platform, but it's definitely professionalizing. We're definitely, it's moving into a much more mature phase than it was when I got on the platform.
Where does AI play into this? Because on one side, I look at it and I think YouTube solved for distribution really early. Like we were talking about, one person now can hit upload and reach a huge audience. But production was still hard. Like one creator couldn't compete with Industrial Lights and Magic or Weta. Like you couldn't have 300 Johnny Harrises storming a hill very easily, or like the map stuff that you do. But now with AI, it could be a special effects house for you. But on the other hand, with rigorous journalism, you used to say, like, was it believe half of what you see? But now, like, how do you know how much to believe?
This is a big open question, and we are dipping our toe into it a little bit to just see how we feel about it. I'm not sure. I do know that AI has opened up a lot of avenues for us creatively. We will generate a lot of assets in AI and then use those either as inspiration or storyboarding or thumbnail design, or we'll actually use them as assets and we'll cut them out and we'll animate them and we'll use them as sort of collage. At the pace it's going, AI is the new Photoshop. Like it'll be the professional tool that people use to massively lower the bar. And I think that's nothing but a good thing in the sense that, like, for creativity, I think it's a good thing. Deep fakes and misinformation. We did a video on this, and it's definitely an issue, especially for evidence in court and all these other things. I tend to believe that audiences, especially younger audiences, in the same way that when the internet came around, my parents were like, they can post anything these days and you won't know if it's true. Yeah. And me as a child of the internet, I was like, this is obviously not true. It's from this like crappy website. I think my kids will see a deep fake and be like, come on, Dad, you know that's not real. And I'm like, yeah, but it looks real. Kids these days. I think there's going to be a savviness upgrade among younger generations. And then I also think there's going to be software that paces with AI to be able to detect. I hope so. I could be totally off on this. And if I am, that's scary. But I tend to think that, like, we will recalibrate and that a lot of the things we see will be sort of subtle B2B kind of technical upgrades that allow us to do creative work better. So it's not as hot of a take as we've seen with AI, but I think it's a net positive for creators.
One of the things that you've been vocal about, which I really admire, is sourcing, attribution, footnotes, fact checking. How would you like to see that evolve on YouTube?
So I wasn't always vocal about this, and I became vocal about it because my audience really flagged it as an important thing for trust. Trust in what you see on the internet, to the earlier point about AI, is much more scrutinizing. In the same way that some people are losing interest, the people who are still maintaining interest are more skeptical than ever. And so in a world where there's a lot of independent journalists, I think that hand in hand with that, since we don't have the big banner called the New York Times or the Washington Post to imbue the content with trust, we're going to have to signal to the audience, hey, I know you're seeing me for the first time and I'm on a YouTube channel, but I promise I did a lot of work here. I'm not just giving you flashy graphics and cool music. I did a lot of work here. And indeed, we did do a lot of work. And how do we show that to the audience? Well, sometimes I'll show them video footage of me circling the primary source document or whatever. So, but I envision a world where YouTube, the platform, allows me to take all of my reporting and my sources and make it available in sort of an open source, Wikipedia-esque community scrutiny type way, where I can show everything, that all of my sources and how I fact check the video, and the audience can interact with that and they can rate it, they can challenge it. Maybe there's an AI bot there comparing what I put up with what I said and see if it's actually right, so that we're not manipulating the sources tool. But I think audiences, if we're talking about trust on the platform, the best way to do that is to allow audiences to peek behind the curtain. The ones who want to, the 1% of viewers who want to peek behind the curtain. The other version of this is comments. Comments right now are incentivized to be a polemic dumpster fire of dogpiling and bad faith critique. That's just human nature. This is how the internet works. I think that from a technology perspective, YouTube could help us creators surface comments that are good faith critiques, that are actually engaging with the content, that are mounting facts and dissent. I love that stuff. And there are people in the comments that do that, but it's not attention grabbing. It's not incentivized by the sort of group dynamic. But I think it could be. If my channel is a curated community of people who want to learn, we should be able to direct how that space is imbued with meaning and discourse. And right now the comments remain what we all know about the comments, which is sort of the worst of human impulses. My hope is that the YouTube viewing experience can be imbued with sources, with good discourse, and that will help everyone navigate this sort of hard time.
I love that. No spoilers, of course, but stay tuned.
Yeah, okay.
Johnny,
keep pushing.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Totally.
Where can people find you if they want to see more?
So Johnny Harris, and then our new channel is Search Party with Sam Ellis, my old Vox colleague, who started a channel on geopolitics and sports. And then just stay tuned. I'll be announcing future channels as we build them.
Amazing.
Okay, awesome.